This episode of the Canon Puncture Show was recorded on Thursday, January 7th, 2010. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Canon Puncture Show. This is Rich here, and we're continuing our series of game advocates. And the advocate I have today is Jesse Burneko. How are you doing, Jesse?
I'm doing pretty good. How are things with you?
Very good. So Jesse, first of all, I just wanted to say you just started a new podcast called Actual People, Actual Play, right?
Well, actually, Will Huggins started it, but yes, it is centered around a game that I am game mastering at the moment.
We'll put a link in the show notes. You guys should check that out. It's a very different style of actual play type of podcast. Nothing I've heard before. Really interesting stuff. So I look forward to hearing some more. You guys have one episode out right now as of this recording. You need to put out more content for me to download, okay?
Okay, we're working on it.
What game are you advocating for, Jesse?
I am advocating for Sorcerer by Ron Edwards, which is a game takes place in the contemporary world. Only the players are all people who can summon and make deals with demons for power. And actually I consider the game to be almost two games. There's sort of the core Sorcerer, which I described. Uh-huh. And there's a supplement for the game called Sorcerer and Sword, which I think adds enough difference and options to almost be considered a different game. It has a different feel when I play it. And that opens it up from sort of the Constantine modern day Hellblazer demon summoning to something a little broader that can do classic pulp dark fantasy like Conan or Fafhrd and Mauser and Elric. And I play both whenever I can.
Do you have a favorite?
I think I prefer Sorcerer and Sword over core Sorcerer because I think it's as I said, it's a broader game. Whenever I play regular Sorcerer, I really have to kind of nail the concept that we're doing. Otherwise, you can kind of get really, really disparate results with it.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. While we talk about this, you feel free to talk about whether you want to talk about Sorcerer Core or Sorcerer and Sword, and we'll just let you advocate for both. You get a 2-in-1. It's a special deal here, Jesse.
Okay.
So, what makes this game different from your run-of-the-mill RPG?
First of all, it has a really strong, grabby focus. It's very easy to kind of determine whether a person's going to be into it or not, because you basically go, hey, look, you're a dude who summons demons. And their eyes either light up and go, oh, I'm a dude who summons demons. Or they go, that sounds kind of scary. And the rule system itself has a lot of features that I feel like I don't really see in a lot of other games, even other, quote unquote, indie games that have followed Sorcerer, that really promote forward moving action on the part of the player. I've had players who, say, hey, that sounds cool, I'll give it a try, and kind of not work for them because they don't know how much the game requires, like, really punching hard with your character in a forward motion. And if you kind of just sort of are totally reactive and just sort of leap around, the game will actually fight you and you'll just sort of flail. And I've never seen a game that is so lasered focused on this ever push forward.
That's really interesting, kind of theoretically how that works. Do you have any real world examples or actual at the table examples of how that game would work and push somebody to make those kind of decisions?
I was playing, and this goes sort of the Sorcerer and Sword game. I was playing a Dictionary of Moo game, and it was kind of the opening scene for one of the characters, and his character was a son of the Witch King from that setting, which is a Dictionary of Moo is a published setting for Sorcerer and Sword. And the Witch King had sent him his own personal mummy that was a gift to his son, because the Witch King has these mummies that are chained to slaves, and he sent both a slave as a gift and a mummy that was chained to keep eye. And the player decided, oh, I'm gonna fight this mummy because I don't want to accept my father's horrible gift of this evil, vile thing. And what he immediately discovered was that because he could take one of the core rules of the game is whenever you're successful at a given action, if you follow that action up by something that capitalizes on your previous success, you can take the successes, which are essentially the number of dice that you succeeded with, and add them onto your next roll. And that allowed him to create almost like combo moves in this fight, where he was on top of this tower and he's like, okay, well, first I try to kick the mummy, and the mummy, in this case it kind of worked against him because he actually failed that roll, and the mummy caught him, and then I was able to chain the mummy's victories into my next action as I kind of like spinned him in order to like throw him on the ground away from me. and there's this momentum, and as soon as the player realized that he could do that, it was just every scene after that was, how do I capitalize on my last success? How do I capitalize on my success? How do I chain all these moves together so that everything became this incredible, like, well, I'm going to do this thing because I want to take those victories and I want to apply it to this thing, and then I want to apply it to this next thing, and you just get this great rushing forward of action.
That sounds really, really fun. That's cool. With this example, tell me a little bit more about what's the subject of the game at the table. And you choose sorcerer, and sword, or both if you want. But like, how does it play out at the table? What are the kind of stories that are told?
They're very personal stories. Even the fantasy setting, you're not going to be doing, war epics, Lord of the Rings style. It's very much about the personal. The tagline on the back of the game is, what are you willing to do to get what you want? It's very much a very close look examination of who is this guy? What does he want? Why has he summoned a demon? Probably one of my favorite games that this is an example from Core Sorcerer that I played was, we decided we were going to do kind of a Southern Gothic game. And we set it in Louisiana, New Orleans specifically, right after the Katrina disaster. And the entire game was pretty much a family feud over property. I mean, that's what was at stake, was a house. But it was, there was all kinds of like creepy, there was a demon down in a basement that the patriarch of one of the families, used to threaten his children with. It's like, those abusive fathers who are all like, well, if you don't behave, I'm gonna give you the belt. Well, if you don't behave, you get to go down to the basement with the demon. And that really brings into light what these people are about. Because when you have the option of just doing something bad or doing something really horrible, you really see where these characters' boundaries are, what's at personal stake for these people.
You're talking about modern day, and you're talking about kind of magic and that type stuff. Why would I want to play sorcerers when I could play White Wolf's mage?
Well, one of the key differences, and this applies to most White Wolf games, or even a lot of other urban fantasy, I guess you would call them, games, and even in a little bit into the urban fantasy literature, is they kind of all posit a hidden world. They kind of posit that, oh, you're a mage, and there's actually this whole society of mages that do magey things. And one of the core, philosophy points of Sorcerer is that's not true in Sorcerer. In Sorcerer, the demons, the phrase that goes around is that the demons are not real, which is that, no, demons don't exist in the causal sense that, well, because we now have a world with demons, what would that be like? No, you really are Joe the accountant, and you really have Joe the accountant priorities. It's just that you happen to have learned to break the rules of reality. There is no hidden reality. You have violated reality. And that is a fundamental different philosophy, that I don't know of any other sort of urban fantasy game that does that, because almost the fun of a lot of urban fantasies is, well, what if this were true? And then extrapolating all the, the consequences of that. And Sorcerer doesn't have that. Everything we know today is true. The cops won't believe you. There is no secret demon police. There's no secret hidden demon sorcerer world. There is just the real world, and you have brought demons into it.
Wow, that's good. That's a good answer. I really like that. So let's say you sold me, right? And I'm interested in trying out Sorcerer. I've never played it before. What are some of the pitfalls that you'd warn me about trying out the game for the first time?
A lot of people have a problem with the text itself. The book is written very tersely and very deliberately, and a lot of people who are used to reading other RPG texts often miss critical statements that are in that book, because in almost any other RPG text that would just be advice or fluff or maybe some color, when in fact, no, this is a real hard, serious thing you need to consider when playing this game. Another pitfall is that I think people see. So I should explain that the central mechanic of the game revolves around this score called humanity. And when you deal with demons, you risk your humanity. And when you do things in the real world, and this is where sort of, again, a touch point for the mechanics and that real world element, when you do things in the real world that are genuine or honest or whatever your idea of humanity is, you gain humanity. You can also lose humanity through similar actions. You don't lose humanity just through demons. Losing humanity to demons is a lot easier, but you also gain and lose humanity for engaging the real world as a real person. And one of the things the game tells you is that your group kind of needs to come to an understanding about what does humanity mean for the game you're playing. And I find that beginners hear that and they over-intellectualize it. They're like, well, my Lit 101 professor told me that, selfishness is a good theme, or selflessness, or, altruism. So therefore humanity is altruism. And then their game doesn't really work. Yes, you need to come to that consensus. But one of the things that I recommend is go color first. You have picked up this book because the idea of playing a demon-wielding person appeals to you. Ask yourself, what does that look like in your mind? What is cool about that? What does that look like? What do you want to do with that? An example for me is I have, when I play Sorcerer and Sword, I have this sort of a Gothic setting that I was sitting down one day and I was flipping through some of my old D&D Ravenloft books, and I was like, I could totally do this with Sorcerer. And I started with, why do I want to do this with Sorcerer? Well, because I imagine this guy with like a sword, kneeling at the grave of his fallen brother and summoning the soul of his fallen brother into the sword. And that's his demon because he's going to avenge his brother's death. And I imagine, a lich sitting on a throne holding a gemstone that's pulsing and bleeding in his hand. And it's like, well, that's what to me sorcery looks like in this setting. And then I stepped back and I said, well, what is that about? And it actually took me several years. For a long time, I was saying, people would ask me, well, what's the humanity definition in your Gothic setting? And the best I could do was emotional sanity. And a lot of people were kind of like, what does that even mean? And I finally, like literally just maybe 6 or 7 months ago, gave that up and said, no, my setting's about love. It's about love. It's about love for your family. It's about love for your girlfriend. It's about love of faith. If you're religious, it's about a world where does functional love end and dysfunctional obsession begin? And that's my humanity definition. But I didn't start there. I started with what is cool and awesome about this setting, and then stepped back and said, okay, what is that about? And that's your humanity definition, because then you don't get some over-intellectualized thing that you picked off a shelf. You get something that actually speaks to you because you started with something that was awesome.
So this Gothic setting, have you used it?
Yeah, I've run some con games in it. I've run some three or four back-to-back story arcs with some group. I pull it off the shelf from time to time. It's actually, oddly enough, kind of a hard sell
Hmm.
to my friends. I have I, I've had, I end up with a problem. I either end up with people who really dig on Sorcerer but don't dig on my color for it, or I have people who really dig on my setting but then don't end up digging on Sorcerer. so,
Weird.
so that setting of mine is a little cursed.
Well, that begs the question: what is it that people hate about Sorcerer?
The game on the cover says an intense role-playing game, and it doesn't lie. I've had two players in the middle of a game basically burst into tears. The game really has certain mechanical components that can make you feel trapped. An example of that is the way what would be, I guess, traditionally called an initiative system works. Everybody sort of announces what they want to do openly, including the GM. The GM's announcing what his characters can do. One of the things I learned is that depending on how I announce actions for NPCs, I can really corner a player in terms of their options. An example of this is a woman and her demon were searching a room in a building, and I said, "Okay, you hear somebody coming through the door," and she really wanted her and her demon to hide. And I realized because the GM controls the demons in Sorcerer, if I announced any other action for the demon other than hiding, it would become impossible by the rules for her to both hide herself and hide the demon, because ordering a demon to do something is an action, which means that the dude will have been coming through the door. So, because that's his action. His action is the guy's coming through the door. Her action is I'm hiding. And if I said anything for the other demon, if I said, okay, the demon's attacking the guy who's coming through the door, there's no way by the rules that she could hide herself and the demon. She would have to choose. She would have to say, she would either have to hide and let the demon kill the guy, or she would have to order the demon down in order to see who's even coming through the door, but then she couldn't hide. And you can, along with like just that, plus several other sort of just kind of broader procedural elements, the game can get really intense. The game can be like, wow, things are really at stake here, and I'm feeling really pinned down and trapped. And it's not like PTA where it's like, well, I can declare anything I want. Well, the stakes of the thing are, do we hide? You because it's the mechanics are closer in than that. And you could, and I think people don't like, some people don't like that intensity. They don't like that pressure. They don't like that I got to choose between these things, but why can't I have both? And it even creates anxiety for the GM, because you're looking at this situation and you're like, well, that sounds reasonable. Why can't I adjudicate that by these rules? And then you're like, oh no, because you're not supposed to. Because it's a game about how far are you willing to go to get what you want. And sometimes, the vagaries of fate or the situation just simply rob you of certain options, and you have to choose between much harder, much more, again, forward moving actions that hiding is an attempt to disengage, and it's when you got you and another person and you have no control over that other person, it makes it really difficult to hide or run away, because, well, your demon's going to be there and he's going to kill the guy. Are you going to stand for that?
Oh, okay. So on the flip side, what are some things that that players love about this game?
Well, there's the sheer fact that the demons are fun. It's fun to build a demon. You have basically 5 different types of demons to choose from. You can have what's called an object demon, which is something like a ring or a sword in a fantasy setting. You can have an inconspicuous demon, which is like, it might be small, like a little imp, or it might be like your own shadow. You have a passer demon, which, looks like something else that could be like a familiar, like a cat, or, a very popular one is, the hot demon girlfriend I summoned up, sort of like succubus kind of character. You have a possessor demon, which is, something that's housed in a host that's kind of still in there somewhere, which might even be yourself under certain applications of the rules. And you have parasite demons, which are, like you might cut off your hand and have like a demonic hand or a demonic eye or something that lives in your bloodstream. And that stuff is just, it's just fun. It's just fun to have a demon if you like building. They become these very strong, thematic elements. I mean, one of the things that when people are like, "Oh, Sorcerer seems so grim dark," I'm like, "Do you ever seen Little Shop of Horrors?" And they're like, "Yeah, I love Little Shop of Horrors." Yeah, that's a Sorcerer story because he has a cool man-eating man-eating plant that makes him rich. And so when you realize how flexible that is, when you're like, well, Little Shop of Horrors is kind of like a dark comedy. I'm like, yeah, it's a dark comedy. It's not grim or gross or anything. It's like, well, go ahead. What if you were to summon something up? What would it be? Would it be a demonic hand? Would it be the hot succubus girl? I mean, it's fun to create a demon. And there is a power fantasy element to it, but it's a power fantasy element to it that's like I said, it's grounded in all that other. It's grounded in the humanity. It's grounded in the fact that there is no hidden world or fake sorcerer world. The rules do not let you escape your consequences. So the power fantasy combined with that intense stress can be fun. It makes it like roller coaster or skydiving.
Cool. What are some of your favorite moments at the table playing Sorcerer?
Let's see. There was probably my most favorite moment of all time was goes back to that Louisiana Southern Gothic game I was talking about, and I had a lawyer show up. The players, 3 out of the 4 players were part of the same family, and they were a black family who came from slave roots, who had won their freedom over the century, and learned sorcery through their family heritage. And this lawyer shows up, basically saying, yeah, we're making a property claim on your house because of some really old technicality. I don't even remember what it was I contrived. But basically this lawyer showed up. And one of the players just turned to me and goes, in her best Southern accent, she just said, well, if you'll just give me a moment, I'd like to summon my lawyer. And I knew exactly what she was going to do. And she and the whole family go in the back room, and she gets the deed to the house. And she brings it into the center of the room and she burns it. And she summons up this perfect Southern gentleman, passer demon lawyer. Well, in the process, the rolls for this thing go really badly. Really badly. I mean, what ends up happening is the demon ends up bound to not the woman who summoned it, but her 14-year-old nephew. And because the demon was designed to represent the interests of the sorcerer who it's bound to, well, he's now representing the interests of this 14-year-old. And this 14-year-old turns out that he is he's actually an illegitimate son from the rival family that they're sort of in this feud with. So he's actually a descendant of both families. And now there's this lawyer who represents his interest, who is now basically through incredibly sorcerer fueled legal means taking both families down and saying, well, this 14-year-old boy is the rightful heir to both your stuff. And it was just like, wow, what happens when you have the ultimate attorney looking after the interests of a 14-year-old kind of wayward teenager. And it was this incredible moment. Probably my second favorite to kind of go with, that was what I consider a core sorcerer game because it's modern day. Sort of another example from a sorcerer and sword setting was, it was in my Gothic setting, and one of the players had discovered that her great grandmother was a lich. And her great grandmother was slowly ruining everything in her life because she needed her help in completing another ritual that went bad, hundreds of years ago. basically to finish turning her great grandfather into a lich, and she needed the help of this living sorcerer. So she was slowly ruining this woman's life to harness her living sorcerer's power. And what the player did was she went and she started constructing a gravesite. She went to the family graveyard. She dug a grave. She made a coffin. She picked flowers. She got other family members together. I'm like, where are you going with this? Where are you going? This is awesome, but where are you going with this? What she did was she built a contain. And what a contain is that's a ritual that you can do in the game that allows you to immobilize a demon effectively. And she basically built a funeral for her undead grandmother and pushed her into the grave and buried her. And it was this, oh my God, she held a funeral for her undead lich demon grandmother. And it was powerful. It was real. Like I said, there's that element of realty because that's what you have to do. You know, you have to let go of your dead. And that's what she did. She had a funeral for her grandmother. It's not your time anymore. It's time to move on. And it was probably one of the more powerful moments in playing Sorcerer.
Those are good moments, man. I'd like to be at the table at those. That's great. That's really good. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about with Sorcerer Core and Sorcerer and Sword?
That's a very good question. Because there's a lot of stuff that I could talk about. A lot of people are afraid of the game, but I have that attraction to it where it's like, wow, this looks really cool, but I don't know how to run it. It takes practice. I've my first 3 Sorcerer games were terrible. I got all the rules wrong. Learning how to apply the rollover currency appropriately and adjudicating bonus dice. And I literally read the book about once a year. About once a year, I get a hankering for, oh man, I want to play some Sorcerer. And I pull the book down and I read it cover to cover. And every time I do that, I see something that I didn't see the first time. A lot of people joke on the forums that Sorcerer itself is a demon. The book is a demon and it rewrites itself because everybody goes to the forums and they say, hey, Ron, I don't understand this. And Ron will reply and they'll say, but that's not in the book. And Ron goes, well, look under here. And they'll go, damn it, it is in the book. When did that get there? And it's like almost everything that has ever been clarified about Sorcerer, it's in the book somewhere. It may not be, worded in the most, it's not a big deal or it's kind of an offhand phrase, but it's all in there. It's all in there somewhere. And so if you want to play the game, but don't play the game with people who also don't want to play the game. Don't play the game with people who aren't as kind of drawn to it as you are, because that's how you end up with people who get really upset and feel really frustrated and the game goes nowhere. The game really does require a buy-in into this idea of, look, you can summon a demon. What would you do with that? Where would you take that? And if you can't answer that question, often I've had to stop a game and I've been looking for one of these frustrated players. And I've said, look, imagine you could summon a demon in real life. Like, forget your character. What is there anything in your life you would summon a demon for? And their answer is often like, no, that's a horrible act. Who would ever do that? And I'm like, you are not the kind of person to play this game. So yeah, you need to really be of a certain temperament. And I would say, if you want to play the game, dive in, play the game, but make sure you're playing with people who are willing to take that same risk with you.
Some words to live by. I think that's very cool, Jesse. I appreciate you taking some time to advocate for Sorcerer. Keep putting out episodes for actual people. Oh
yeah, we've already recorded 2 other episodes, and
sweet.
Yeah, and we're recording a 3rd one this Saturday, or a 4th one actually this Saturday. So we're gonna keep looking forward to that.
Good deal. Well, thanks for being on the show, Jesse.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
We had such potential, such promise.